Right now, as you watch this, you're about to discover something that will change how you see yourself forever. If you've always felt like you don't quite fit in, if you see patterns others miss, if you're exhausted by small talk but crave deep connection, you might possess one of the rarest personality types Carl Jung ever studied. And according to Jung himself, fewer than 5% of people ever develop these traits. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why you've always felt different, and why that's your greatest strength. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, spent his entire life studying what makes certain individuals truly rare, not just intelligent, not just talented, but psychologically evolved in ways most people never achieve. Jung discovered something remarkable. While society celebrates external success, true psychological rarity comes from an internal process he called individuation, the journey of becoming your authentic self. And he was brutally honest about how few people actually complete this journey. As Jung himself wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Each of us carries his own life form, an indeterminable form which cannot be superseded by any other." Today, we're diving deep into the 8 signs that you possess an extremely rare personality, according to Jungian psychology. These aren't surface-level traits. These are profound psychological characteristics that Jung associated with the most psychologically mature and individuated people he ever studied. The first sign of an extremely rare personality is that you experience frequent synchronicities, and you actually notice them. Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that can't be explained by cause and effect. He defined it as an acausal connecting principle, whereby internal psychological events are linked to external world events by meaningful coincidences rather than causal chains. Here's Jung's most famous example. One of his patients was describing a dream about receiving a golden scarab beetle. At that exact moment, Jung heard tapping on his office window. He opened it, and a scarab beetle, incredibly rare in Switzerland, flew into the room. This meaningful coincidence helped break through the patient's rigid rationalism and catalyzed her healing. Jung discovered that certain personality types, especially what he called introverted intuitives, experience synchronicities far more frequently than others. Why? Because they're naturally attuned to the symbolic language of the unconscious mind. In modern life, this might look like thinking about an old friend seconds before they call you, encountering the exact book or message you needed at a crucial decision point, repeatedly seeing specific numbers or symbols during major life transitions. Most people dismiss these as just coincidence. But if you have this rare personality trait, you recognize these moments as communications from a deeper intelligence, what Jung called the collective unconscious. Here's the practical application. Start keeping a synchronicity journal. When you notice a meaningful coincidence, write down what was happening internally, your thoughts, feelings, questions, alongside the external event. Over time, you'll discover that synchronicities often appear when you're at psychological crossroads, offering guidance from your unconscious mind. Jung wrote, "Synchronistic phenomena prove the simultaneous occurrence of meaningful equivalences in heterogeneous, causally unrelated processes." Translation: the universe and your psyche are far more connected than rational materialism admits. If you're already recognizing synchronicities in your life, drop a comment below sharing one experience. Let's see how many of us are tuning into this deeper frequency. The second sign is perhaps the most important. You've done the brutal work of confronting your shadow, and you're still doing it. Jung was crystal clear about this. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. Your shadow contains everything about yourself that you've repressed, denied, or hidden. Not just negative traits, but also positive qualities you were told weren't acceptable. It's the anger you learned to suppress, the ambition you were taught to hide, the creativity you sacrificed for stability, the wildness you tamed to be professional. Here's what makes this rare. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow, projecting it onto others instead of owning it. When you can't stand your co-worker's arrogance, that's often your own repressed confidence. When you're magnetically attracted to someone's spontaneity, that's your own suppressed freedom calling. Jung put it perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In real life, shadow work looks like this. A 32-year-old tech professional constantly quit jobs blaming incompetent bosses. Through shadow work, he discovered he was projecting his own insecurities about authority onto every manager. When he owned his shadow, acknowledged his own uncertainty and need to always be right, he finally maintained a job for years and built genuine collaborative relationships. The practical advice here is transformative. Track your emotional triggers. When someone irritates you intensely, ask yourself, what quality in them am I denying in myself? Journal about it with brutal honesty. You'll discover that the traits you judge most harshly in others are precisely the disowned parts of yourself fighting to be integrated. Jung emphasized, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. Shadow work isn't comfortable, but it's the difference between living authentically and performing a role. And if you've committed to this work, you possess one of the rarest forms of psychological courage. The third sign. You've always felt fundamentally different from most people, and statistical data proves you probably are. Jung developed the theory of psychological types, which later inspired the Myers-Briggs type indicator. He discovered that certain personality configurations are extraordinarily rare. Specifically, introverted intuitives, what Jung called mystical dreamers and seers, represent only 1–2% of the population. Jung described the introverted intuitive type with remarkable precision. The peculiar nature of introverted intuition produces a peculiar type of man, VZ, the mystical dreamer and seer on the one hand, or the fantastical crank and artist on the other. If you're this type, you've probably experienced feeling misunderstood or too intense in casual conversations, being accused of overthinking everything when you're just processing naturally, struggling to find people who want to discuss ideas and meaning rather than surface-level small talk, feeling physically drained by superficial social situations while energized by deep one-on-one conversations. Jung explained why. The introvert's experience is not inferior but equally valid. For intuition, unconscious images attain to the dignity of things or objects. While most people focus on concrete sensory reality, you naturally perceive patterns, meanings, and future possibilities that others completely miss. In modern workplaces, this manifests as you solve complex problems independently. You see strategic visions years ahead. You need autonomy and deep focus time, making open offices torture. You'd rather work alone effectively than collaborate on something mediocre. The challenge Jung identified still holds true. His language is not that which is commonly spoken. It becomes too subjective. His argument lacks convincing reason. He can only confess or pronounce. His is the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Here's your practical takeaway. Stop trying to be understood by everyone. Your depth is not a flaw, it's a feature. Instead of spreading yourself thin socially, invest in a few quality relationships with fellow deep thinkers. Join communities specifically for intuitive types. Your weirdness is actually exceptional rarity. If you've always felt like an outsider looking in, even in groups, comment "different" below. You'll realize you're not alone. We're just statistically scattered. The fourth sign, you're driven by meaning and purpose rather than conventional success, and this often confuses people around you. Jung observed this consistently in individuated personalities. He wrote, "The only meaningful life is a life that strives for the individual realization, absolute and unconditional, of its own particular law." To the extent that a man is untrue to the law of his being, he has failed to realize his own life's meaning. This means you might turn down the higher-paying job because it lacks purpose. You might leave a successful career to pursue something that aligns with your values. You experience physical illness when working for unethical organizations. One study participant with this rare personality trait said, "When you know in your heart that what the company is doing is wrong, it almost makes you sick." Jung was particularly clear about this in the second half of life, I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among those in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. By religious, Jung didn't mean organized religion. He meant a sense of connection to something larger than ego, whether that's spiritual practice, creative work, service to others, or philosophical inquiry. In practical terms, this looks like a 42-year-old attorney experiencing depression despite external success. Traditional therapy focused on stress management failed. But when she recognized her crisis as a call to individuation, integrating her repressed artistic and spiritual longings, everything shifted. She maintained her law career part-time while launching a writing career, finally experiencing the profound purpose her soul demanded. The difference between you and most people? Jung explained it. The bigger the crowd, the more negligible the individual becomes. A million zeros joined together do not, unfortunately, add up to one. Ultimately, everything depends on the quality of the individual. You've rejected the million zeros approach. You're building quality of character over quantity of achievements, and that's extraordinarily rare. Here's what to do with this. If you're between 25-45, especially approaching midlife, don't pathologize your meaning crisis. It's not depression, it's your psyche demanding evolution. Ask yourself, if I had 5 years to live, would I continue my current path? Whatever emerges is your soul's true calling. Before we continue, if this video is helping you understand yourself at a deeper level, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We're building a community of people committed to psychological depth and authentic transformation. 95% of viewers who find this valuable aren't subscribed yet. Be part of the 5% who are. The fifth sign of an extremely rare personality. You can hold paradox and integrate opposites rather than splitting everything into black and white. This is what Jung called the union of opposites. And it's the hallmark of psychological maturity that most people never achieve. Jung wrote, "The self is a true coincidentia oppositorum," meaning the self contains both light and dark, masculine and feminine, strength and vulnerability, all at once. Most people operate from rigid either-or thinking. You're either confident or humble, successful or authentic, rational or emotional, strong or vulnerable. But if you have this rare trait, you've discovered the powerful and confident and humble, successful and authentic, rational and emotional. This shows up in real life as you can acknowledge your accomplishments without arrogance. You can be assertive while remaining compassionate. You can critique something you love. You can feel two contradictory emotions simultaneously without needing to eliminate one. Jung explained why this is so difficult. In reality, the acceptance of the shadow side of human nature verges on the impossible. Consider for a moment what it means to grant the right of existence to what is unreasonable, senseless, and evil. Yet it is just this that the modern man insists upon. He wants to live with every side of himself, to know what he is. Here's a modern example. A recovering people-pleaser learns to integrate her shadow's selfish impulses. Instead of swinging from doormat to aggressive, she develops genuine boundaries, saying no compassionately, taking care of herself while still caring about others. That's integration, not replacement. The practical application is profound. When you face a difficult decision, resist either-or thinking. Ask, how can both be true? What's the third option that honors both sides? This activates what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological mechanism that creates transformation, by holding tension between opposites until a higher synthesis emerges. Jung described this beautifully. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. Once one has experienced a few times what it is like to stand judgingly between the opposites, one begins to understand what is meant by the self. If you can embrace your full humanity, the beautiful and the ugly, the strong and the broken, you're operating at a level of psychological sophistication that most people never reach. The sixth sign. You recognize archetypal patterns playing out in your life and the world around you. Jung discovered what he called the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of the unconscious shared by all humanity, containing universal patterns he called archetypes. These include the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the great mother, and many others. Jung explained, "In addition to our immediate consciousness, which is of a thoroughly personal nature, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious does not develop individually but is inherited. If you have this rare awareness, you notice these patterns everywhere. You recognize when you're playing the hero role, rescuing others to avoid your own problems. You see when a relationship falls into the caregiver-wounded child dynamic. You notice societal movements following archetypal narratives, the rebel, the tyrant, the savior. This awareness is incredibly rare because, as Jung noted, the self-actualization of the self-archetype is a very rare phenomenon. However, it is the main goal of human existence. In practical life, this looks like a 35-year-old man stuck in serial relationships, always dating the same type of woman. Through Jungian work, he recognized he was projecting his anima, Jung's term for the unconscious feminine aspect in men, onto every partner. He was falling in love with his own undeveloped emotional depth, not the actual person. When he withdrew the projection and developed emotional expression within himself through journaling and creative work, everything changed. He finally attracted a sustainable partnership based on seeing his partner as a separate person, not his anima carrier. Jung's insight here is liberating. Every human being, however high his conscious development, is still an archaic man at the deeper levels of his psyche. Understanding this removes shame. Your patterns aren't personal failures, they're universal human experiences. The practical advice: study Jungian archetypes. When you're stuck in a pattern, career paralysis, relationship drama, creative block, ask, what archetypal story am I living? Am I the martyr, the eternal child avoiding responsibility, the perfectionist demanding the impossible? Naming the archetype creates distance from it. You move from "I am this problem" to "I'm currently playing this role, and I can choose differently." Jung promised, "The course of individuation exhibits a certain formal regularity. Its signposts and milestones are various archetypal symbols marking its stages. Your awareness of these patterns means you're already on the path that most people never find. The seventh sign, you've experienced what Jung called the dark night of psychological transformation, and you did not run from it. Jung was unequivocal about this. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Individuation is an heroic and often tragic task, the most difficult of all. It involves suffering, a passion of the ego. This isn't clinical depression, though it can feel similar. It's the psychological crisis that happens when your ego structure cracks open to allow growth. When the life you built no longer fits who you're becoming. When everything that once gave you identity, career, relationship, beliefs, suddenly feels empty. Jung called this necessary suffering. He wrote, "The way of the individuation is an individual destiny. There is no linear evolution. There is only circumambulation of the self. If you've experienced this, you know the job that once fulfilled you becomes suffocating. The relationship that seemed perfect reveals fundamental misalignment. The beliefs you held with certainty crumble, and for months or years you exist in the void between who you were and who you're becoming." This is extraordinarily rare because most people, when they hit this point, do everything possible to avoid it. Throw themselves into work, start a new relationship immediately, move to a new city, anything to escape the discomfort. But you did something different. You stayed in the fire. You sat with the uncertainty. You let the old self die so the true self could emerge. Jung understood this deeply from personal experience. Between 1913 and 1917, he experienced his own dark night, which he documented in the Red Book. He wrote, "My soul, where are you? Do you hear me? I speak, I call you, are you there?" A modern example. A woman in her late 30s experienced complete burnout despite a successful non-profit career. Traditional therapy treated it as stress management, but Jungian analysis revealed it differently. Her psyche was demanding she stop living for others' approval and start honoring her own creative calling. The burnout wasn't a problem to fix. It was a message to heed. She started a side art therapy business, learned to say no, and attracted healthier relationships. The dark night was actually a birth canal. Here's the crucial distinction Jung made. The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. Your ego, your constructed identity, must surrender to the larger self, your authentic totality. That surrender feels like death because in a sense it is. The practical guidance: if you're in this dark night right now, don't pathologize it. Don't let anyone tell you to just be positive. Jung's advice was to turn toward it. Use active imagination, work with dreams, journal extensively. These aren't symptoms of breakdown, they're signs of breakthrough. And if you've already been through this and emerged transformed, you carry wisdom most people never access. Your scars are your credentials. The eighth and final sign: you crave a few deep, authentic relationships rather than many superficial connections, and you're willing to be alone until you find your people. Jung observed this consistently in individuated personalities. He wrote, "Individuation is only possible with people through people. You must realize that you are a link in a chain, that you are not an electron suspended somewhere in space or aimlessly drifting through the cosmos." But here's the paradox. True individuation creates more intense and authentic relationships, not isolation. However, the path there often requires periods of profound aloneness. If you have this rare personality trait, you've probably experienced feeling exhausted by large social gatherings while energized by one-on-one deep conversations, being called too intense when you try to go beyond small talk, having a few close friends rather than a large social circle, and preferring it that way, choosing to be alone rather than waste energy on inauthentic connection. Modern society pressures you toward breadth, more followers, more networking contacts, more connections. But Jung valued depth. The self is relatedness. The self only exists inasmuch as you appear. Not that you are, but that you do the self. The self appears in your deeds, and deeds always mean relationship. Real relationship for Jung meant showing up authentically, shadow and all. It meant being witnessed in your totality, not performing a polished persona. Here's what this looks like practically. Instead of maintaining dozens of surface-level friendships, you invest deeply in a few people who truly see you. You'd rather have uncomfortable, honest conversations than comfortable fake ones. You recognize that quality of connection matters infinitely more than quantity of contacts. The challenge Jung identified: resistance to the organized mass can be affected only by the man who is as well organized in his individuality as the mass itself. Translation: you must be strong enough in your individual identity to resist social pressure toward conformity. Most people can't tolerate that level of differentiation. They need the crowd's validation. But you've discovered something liberating. Real connection only happens when both people show up as their authentic selves, not as personas designed to be liked. A practical example: an introverted professional stopped forcing himself to attend networking events that drained him. Instead, he joined a small philosophy discussion group aligned with his interests. He made 2 genuine friends there who became crucial personal and professional allies, worth more than 100 business cards from people who barely remembered meeting him. Jung's promise: the process of individuation must lead to more intense relationships and not to isolation. If you're prioritizing authentic depth over superficial popularity, you're on the individuation path. And when you finally find your people, those who speak your language and match your depth, those connections become unshakable. If you recognized yourself in multiple signs, or even just 1 or 2 deeply, you possess something remarkably rare: the courage and capacity for genuine psychological transformation that Jung called individuation. Remember Jung's words: "A million zeros joined together do not unfortunately add up to 1. Ultimately, everything depends on the quality of the individual." You're not broken. You're not too sensitive, too intense, too different. You're rare. And in a world that celebrates conformity, your willingness to become authentically yourself is revolutionary. Jung understood that this path isn't easy. The way is not without danger. Everything good is costly, and the development of the personality is one of the most costly of all things. But here's what makes it worth it. Living authentically, even when misunderstood, is infinitely more fulfilling than living inauthentically while accepted by everyone. Integration of your shadow brings more peace than any external validation. Meaningful purpose satisfies deeper than any amount of conventional success. The individuals who complete this journey, who do the shadow work, embrace paradox, follow synchronicities, and build authentic relationships, these are the people who actually change the world. Not through force or fame, but through becoming fully themselves. Jung left us with this promise: the individual is obliged by the collective demands to purchase his individuation at the cost of an equivalent work for the benefit of society. Your transformation isn't selfish, it's your greatest contribution. As Jung wrote, the man who confronts his shadow knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in himself. And if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world. So here's my challenge to you. Choose one of the 8 signs that resonated most. This week, take one action based on that trait. Start a synchronicity journal. Do one shadow work exercise. Reach out for a deep conversation with someone who gets you. Honor your need for meaning over money in one decision. Small steps in the direction of authenticity compound into a completely transformed life. You were never meant to fit into the mass. You were meant to individuate, to become the unique expression of human potential that only you can be. As Jung beautifully concluded, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Each of us carries his own life form, an indeterminable form which cannot be superseded by any other. Your life form is yours alone. Stop trying to fit someone else's shoe and start walking your own path. Drop a comment sharing which sign resonated most with you and what action you're committing to this week. Your vulnerability might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this video helped you understand yourself more deeply, share it with someone who's also on this path. We're building a community of individuals brave enough to become themselves. The world doesn't need more copies. It needs more originals. It needs you, fully individuated, shadow-integrated, authentically expressed. Welcome to the 5%. The journey continues.